Welcome to the Sports Talk Line Network. We talk sports 24/7, 365. This is the Sports Talk Line YouTube channel, and this is the New York Giants Weekly with Tom McAllister from New York City. Good day, Tom.
Thanks for having me, Van.
It's a pleasure, Tom. Always a pleasure to have you here. And of course, we're going to talk about the state of the New York Giants in week 3 of the NFL season. And this week, we're going to break it down into a pluses and minuses section. So, hey, let's start out with the pluses first. Let's start out with the good news. What do we got?
Yes, even though the New York Giants are 0-2, there are still some positives Giants fans can take away from, because pretty much with Eli Manning retiring, it kind of brought about the rebuild, and I think the fan base has acknowledged that coming into the season. And when you were depleted at so many levels on the team last year and overmatched, any type of progress is good progress. So one of the big pluses for this year in the first 2 games has been the play of cornerback James Bradberry. This past week against Chicago, he's matched up with Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson had 9 targets for only 3 catches. Bradberry made a spectacular interception in the 4th quarter against the Chicago Bears, and he's stepping up to be the #1 cornerback that the Giants desperately needed coming into 2020. Because a lot of people thought the secondary would be a major issue, but so far in the first 2 weeks, no one has really exploited the secondary.
Well, I got to agree with you on that, because, Janoris Jenkins gone, Eli Apple gone, and there's somebody else's problem, or not even playing right now. And then here, this guy looks to be getting the job done, doesn't he?
Yes, he is. And the second player who's stepping up in 2020 is Lorenzo Carter. He was a Dave Gettleman draft pick in 2018. A lot of people were kind of waiting for him to step up and consistently play. In the first 2 games of 2020, he has been consistent. He's been consistently putting pressure on the quarterback. He could potentially become this outside threat in the pass rushing game that the Giants so sorely need. And that also goes into the New York Giants have a pass rush in 2020. When you looked at the early games in 2019, the quarterback could lean back on 3rd down for 4, 5, 6 seconds and tear apart the Giants secondary. This year, not so much. They are actually getting some sacks. They're putting up some pressures. You can't really point to one player. This has been something that's been consistent throughout. And usually the most successful pass rushing attacks don't rely on one player. They rely on multiple players who can get to the quarterback.
Oh, well, yeah, absolutely. That is the thing. And actually, we're going to talk about how that's no longer the case in San Francisco later. But let's keep going down the list here. What else you got in the plus column? Or is it time to move over to the minus column? And then I can ask you about cornerbacks in the minus column, and I can mention the name Baker.
Well, I was going to those were the pluses. No, I'll throw in one more plus.
All right.
And that is you can see a culture change. This is something where the Giants usually for decades had the Giants culture, which started to erode a few years ago. Who you can point that at, we're not sure, but it was happening. It looks like with new head coach Joe Judge, there's a lot more effort going in. You see on the defensive side, you see a lot more gang tackling, which was not something that you saw in 2019. There was a situation in the game against the Chicago Bears where there was a roughing a quarterback play, and the whole offensive line ran over to protect their quarterback. So those are things that have been maybe one player would go over, but this is the whole team going over. And you kind of see even though they're 0-2, they appear to be buying into Joe Judge's culture, which I think would score a lot of points with John Mara, the owner of the New York Giants. So I think that's also a plus looking forward.
Yeah, I've heard the word accountability, and players are buying in.
Yes. No one has a guaranteed starting spot, which I think is somewhat refreshing, and it's kind of showing who runs the show.
Which is important. If the players don't buy in, you can be an accountability guy. Think of a certain guy who went to Jacksonville. His first few years with the Giants, he was this close to being fired, and then he had an epiphany and changed his ways.
Yes,
all right?
He did. They almost fired him twice. It turned out the 3rd time they actually did.
All right. So then he goes down to Jacksonville, and he's just all piss and vinegar down there, and it just does not work out. Joe Judge makes it work. So I'm going to add you one more, which I think is a plus, not a minus. Maybe it's just me, but I think Sequon Barkley being out right now is a plus for the immediate. And you're saying, no way, okay? You lose somebody like Sequon Barkley. He is too talented. And I'm not going to disagree with that. But I have yet to find a set of coaches at the New York Giants in previous years or this year that can use him effectively or consistently. And I think they're going to have better luck with his backup, Devontae Freeman.
Well, I think with Sequon Barkley, he had a monster rookie season. You know, in 2018, playing against a very questionable offensive line, haven't heard that before, for the New York Giants. And, you know, he pretty much, I believe he had close, if not surpassed, 2,000 total yards. And, you know, 2019, he had the injury bug. I felt like they rushed him back from injury.
Yes, I agree 100%.
He might have been better off, know what, just heal up. You know, but it happens when you have a coach and a GM who are on the hot seat. They need to get some wins and need to be their most talented offensive player out there. In 2020, you didn't see that against the Pittsburgh Steelers. You know, how do you get to Sequon Barkley? You get multiple guys in the backfield behind the line of scrimmage. That's how you get to him, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are very effective in that.
That'll do it. That'll do it. Absolutely.
This is something, though, too, where instead of defenses maybe focusing on one player, when you look on paper at the Giants and probably even on film, all right, who's the one person you're going to match up on? You really don't have that.
Nobody.
You know, so that's something, you know, we'll see what happens. And I think it's also how will the offensive line develop? And
well, I think that's one of the reasons why he may be getting that injury-prone label is basically whenever he gets the ball, everybody in the defense is going to fly to him because everybody's watching him because there's nobody else that scares you.
Yeah, I think that, you know, Sequon Barkley is the centerpiece of the Giants offense on paper. And, you know, if you're a defensive
He's also the wing pieces, though. I mean, it's he's got the whole ball of wax.
Yeah, he's the one piece.
All right. Well, let's slide over to the minuses, okay? Enough about the pluses. Let's slide over to the minuses. I already threw in the one dig about Baker, but that's old news. All right, let's just talk about the ability of the quarterback and turnovers.
Yeah, I think that is one issue right there is Daniel Jones's turnovers. He's very frustrating because a lot of times he can make great throws, but he's turnover prone, and this has made its way around the NFL. So anytime a defensive end is coming in against Daniel Jones, they're going to be trying to force the fumble. I don't know if there's any form of coaching that can repair this. This is something Daniel Jones is going to have to deal with throughout his career. I remember Tiki Barber had this issue as a running back from the New York Giants. Tom Coughlin came in. He made an investment
That's
of
a
how
good
to carry
story.
the ball. But I think the quarterback, it's so much more like you just got to hold on to the ball. Like you hold on to two ball, you know, with two hands, like you're a 1960s quarterback. I'm not sure. So that's definitely going to be something that has been a concern and still is a concern right now because Daniel Jones, if you look at the numbers, he probably will have more turnovers than some teams have turnovers, which is an alarming rate. I think he's only behind Jameis Winston for turnovers since 2019, which is not.
I was going to say for this year, that's impressive since Jameis hasn't been playing. So I mean,
yeah.
But all right, but now part of the big reason of his turnovers, in my opinion, you can agree or disagree, but it's a nice segue into the offensive line.
Yes.
I think the offensive line is better than last year, but I still think it's a minus for the team right now. Do you agree with that?
It's still, you know, I put it in the question mark category.
All right.
Where they're not fully being outplayed on every passing play and every rushing play. I think on the ground game, it's definitely a minus because the Giants' rushing attack has not been able to develop.
No.
For the passing game, I think there have been times when Daniel Jones has been given enough time. And Daniel Jones has been able to make the throws.
You know, that's true. That's true. I think they've just been very susceptible when they run up against defenses that have, as you pointed out, like the 3 guys that can bring pressure, the 4 guys that can bring pressure. Then I think that their weakness is exposed. You know that they're coming apart then. But okay, that's a question mark. Let's flip to the other side. All right, the defensive backfield I don't think is a problem. Linebacker depth, though. What do you think about that?
I think depth, one of the surprising cuts in 2020 for camp was the cut of Ryan Connolly. He was someone who came out.
Yes.
He was a starting linebacker. He was a 5th-round pick. He had an interception. And
Where's he playing now? He got signed up right away.
Picked him up. Minnesota picked him up in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things where, you know, he was picked up I thought he was going to develop into a fan favorite. The Giants let him go. So, when you look at the linebacker core, I think Blake Martinez is a great addition, to say the least. He's a leading tackler. He provides something that hasn't been there in a while. Lorenzo Carter has started to develop. Marcus Golden, he led the Giants in sack last year. He really hasn't stepped up so much.
They're
this
not using
year.
him the same way this year,
No,
though, are they?
he's in a totally new scheme. So that might be the issue. You also, I think, Frackle was signed at linebacker. The only other one is, I think, Chimneys, I think, is the only other linebacker they got. So I think depth could be an issue for linebacker. And what makes it more alarming is the Giants usually run a 3-4 defense.
Exactly.
That's how they're based out of. They have depth at the defensive line. When, you have B.J. Hill, who came in off the bench, was able to get a sack. I'm a fan of Dexter Lawrence, Dalvin Tomlinson, and Leonard Williams.
Dexter Lawrence is an IDP on my fantasy team, man. I picked him up this last week, so he's good.
Yeah, Dexter Lawrence is, he's. I think he could be the force.
I hope
the middle
so.
for the Giants for the next few years. I think the linebacker core has improved, but I don't think they have the depth just yet.
All right, well, that's all I can think of for minuses. Do you got any more, or just could we slide into the question marks? Of course, we have the one there, which is the offense.
Well, I would say two. We already talked about Sequon Barkley's injury, which is kind of like duh.
All right.
Another one too, though, is a lack of a ground game. Now, we don't know if we can point this at the running back or the offensive line, because you got to remember the Giants' offensive line has 3 new starters. They got Andrew Thomas at left tackle. They have Cam Fleming at line and at right tackle, and they got Nick Gates at center.
Well, so what had Barkley done in the first quarter against the Bears on the ground?
When Barkley went out, he had 28 yards rushing. He had about a 13-yard rush. Right up the middle, little power formation, which the Giants weren't able to do against the Steelers at all. Right. It looked like Barkley got hurt. Oh, boy, I wish that part was true. And then Barkley came in. His next rush, he picked up 5 yards, but he blew out his ACL. The one significant play that sticks out for the offensive line in this game was that the Giants had a 4th and goal from about the 1-yard line. And you just saw the offensive line push the Bears defense out of the way, and the Giants were able to get a touchdown.
That's a great sign. That's a great sign.
That is a sign, when you look at them, that has not been occurring in a long, long time. And also the red zone offense. They've been 1 for 3 for touchdowns.
Ooh, good call.
The first 2 weeks, and that's something that needs to change. For the Giants to be a serious team, they need to flip that.
You have moved the ball, in between the 20s. You have moved the ball. That is true. Now, special teams, I think, have been playing okay.
Yes, no major issues with special teams. They usually win the field position games. They've actually had a fumble recovery. They haven't caused any oopsies. It's funny, though, that I remember when every kicker in the NFL could hit 60-plus yard field goals, mostly against the Giants, as time was expiring to win the game. And now most guys can't even hit an extra point. It's funny how things change.
It is. All right, well, look, let's slide into, we got a little time left here in the show. We want to take a look at what's coming up this week because, we've been mentioning the 49ers. There's a reason we're mentioning the 49ers. They are coming to town. They are coming to New York.
Again.
And before we get into the 49ers injuries, which are, let's just say you guys have someone looking out for you. What I want to point out is basically you guys have both played a home game. You guys have both played an away game. The 49ers have scored 51 points. You've scored 29 points, and they get Kittle back. What are you going to do about that? Or are you going to rely on all these injuries that we're going to talk about?
I definitely think it's going to be interesting to see what the 49ers come out with. They might come out with Chuck Haley at defensive end and maybe have to line up Ricky Waters in the run field with Roger, the way these injuries are looking. But I definitely think, the Giants, they need to address the red zone offense. With the signing of Freeman, he's another guy. He was out of the league. He's a 2-time former Pro Bowler. This could be his mark right here.
Right.
Or, you know what, he might not sign with the Giants, but they can run an offense just for him, where he gets most of the touches, he'll get most of the carries. And then that's going to be something, Freeman's going to be the X factor. I think if he's
I agree. And he's got the talent, or at least has had the talent.
Yeah, and one thing with Freeman, too, he's also a dual threat. He had about 57 catches his last full year in the NFL. He had, I believe, more receiving yards than rushing yards. Right. So that's something to keep an eye on, too, where he can kind of fit into the blend of a dual threat running back, which will help out Daniel Jones. And I think with Freeman, he could probably he's someone who would be more of a grinded out back. Like Sequon Barkley is a home run hitter. Anytime he's on the field, he's pretty much in the red zone. While Freeman is someone who could chip away those 4 or 5 yard carries at a time and wear down a defense, which is something the Giants need.
Speaking of home run hitters, this is time for you as a user to hit a home run and hit that little subscribe button down below. Hit that notify bell, all right? Because without you guys, it is nothing. We really appreciate you coming here, watching, sharing with us. And hey, leave a comment down below what you think is going to happen with the Giants and the 49ers this week. Who do you think is going to win, and why do you think is going to win? Because I'm getting ready to ask Tom right now, your favorite time, every time we have a show, prediction time. Who's going to win this weekend and why?
No, I think Giants are going to win 21-17 because I think the 49ers are hurt. The 49ers came to MetLife and they left complaining about the field. So you got to wonder if there's any guys who have injuries. Like you mentioned, Greg Kittle, who I have on my fantasy team. He did not play in week 2, but he has been practicing this week. So odds are he's probably going to play. You got to wonder if they'll be a little cautious and be like, you know what, if you got a knee injury, seeing all these other guys, maybe not use you as much, maybe use them as a decoy. But I definitely think the Giants offensive line, they're not going up against tremendous pass rushers this week, or at least pass rushers with a tremendous track record, because Nick Bosa and Solomon Thomas, both of them out of the year with an ACL injury. D Ford is doubtful. He did not practice going this one. Their running backs, Tevin Coleman, Raheem Mostert, they are doubtful not practicing. That can change though. Jimmy Garoppolo, he did not practice, but he's questionable. So I think with so much going on, trying to plug in so many pieces, and also playing at home, this could be a time when the Giants might be able to eke out a win.
There you go. Play with a lot of pride, and they do have a lot of pride, and they seem to be playing hard for this coach. I like where you're coming from. I think the biggest question for you guys is Jimmy G going to be throwing the football? If he does, I think him and Kittle have enough connection to give you guys some trouble. But even if Jimmy G's playing, he's not going to be at 100%, is he?
Yeah, and I think one matchup you can kind of see with Kittle will be linebacker Blake Martinez. And I think that will be the matchup to watch going forward, especially if the 49ers don't have a ground game.
And Kittle's not going to be at 100% either.
No, and it's also, too, this also comes down to the turnover battle. If Daniel Jones can not turn the ball over.
That's huge.
It's not turning the ball over, and also when you get in the red zone, putting up some touchdowns.
All right, you heard it here first. You got the score. You know why it's going to happen. Now you just have to tune in. Next week, we'll be doing the NFC East review, where we will be reviewing this game, and we're either going to be looking over and going, damn, Tom, you really know your stuff, or we're going to be going, 0-3, guys. I can't believe it.
Blinded by patriotism, I guess.
Well, no, actually, I got to agree with you this week. I think that the Giants have a darn good chance to win. I really do. And I think a score right around 21-17, something like that, or maybe even 17-14. I think that's highly reasonable. But also, I got to tell you this. Daniel Jones has a lot of untapped talent. If all of a sudden he starts clicking and he gets time to throw the ball, which I think he may get time to throw the ball this week, more than he has had yet because of all of the injuries on the 49ers at defense. And if you give him time to throw the ball and he gets in a rhythm, you guys could, I think, turn it on, 28 or maybe even 30 points. You've got Golden Tate there, and you've got the man at wide receiver who I love a lot, Slayton. I think your passing game could literally blow open this week.
Also, Evan Ingram had a strong second half. But he's also, too, whenever Daniel Jones makes an interception, usually Evan Ingram's the target.
Ooh, so yeah, pay attention to that, all right? Because it's very rarely just one side of the coin's fault in that regard. All right, man, that's it. And again, thank you so much for being here, the people who's listening. Please, before you go, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe, hit that notify bell. If you haven't followed Mr. Tom McAllister yet on Twitter, please do so. You can see on his screen right there, it says @defense_com. Can't miss it. It's right there. You find me on Twitter @Stephen Vanover, Sports Talkline @Sports Talkline, and be sure and come back and follow us for the best highlights on the internet for all the sports that we can find. And until next time, listen like you play with intensity. Go Giants.